You make me nervous, you know?
Really? Sorry.
Yeah. Welcome to the Post-Work podcast from our bunker studio, Karl-Marx Studios, somewhere in Berlin. I'm Pablo Denegri, your host, and today's guest is Miron Zownir, a very well-respected photographer, filmmaker, and writer. Miron, thank you very much for being here.
Hi.
Miron, a bit ago you told me that photography was the door to everything you did afterwards. And I wanted to know how is that you got to photography in the first place?
Actually, it didn't cross my mind to become a photographer. I was much more interested in literature and film. But for film, I was too young, lacked the experience, and they rejected me in 2 film schools.
They rejected you?
Yeah, in Berlin and in Vienna. And my girlfriend at the time, she was studying photography at Ledeverein, and so I needed creative out.
This was in the 70s,
yeah,
no? When you were in Berlin?
In the 70s, when I was living in Berlin. So I borrowed a camera, went out on the streets, and did what I'm still doing: the rejected, the homeless, the freaks.
You have a very particular view, can I say, an object of study that has to do with peripheries or society, if you could say something like that. And you also have a very strong continuity in this line of work. And you told me also off camera that this was not something that you even constructed or worked to, something that kind of just happened.
Yeah, that's true. Well, my outlook on the world, of course, was because of my childhood upbringing at my grandparents, where it was still an after-war feeling. Many veterans, traumatized veterans, widows, crippled people, and some psychos. Also,
it's a very special context, no?
Yeah, well, and also it was a suburb of Karlsruhe, and I grew up there for the first 6-7 years with my grandparents before I moved to my parents. So it was almost. It sounds like a cliche, but it was almost a Kafkaesque situation, very dark. There were still some ruins, and it was a kind of gloomy environment.
Yeah, definitely. Kafkaesque, I think, is correct. Yeah.
My focus on literature after Andersen and Brothers Grimm's and Don Quixote and in the child version and so on was very soon kind of existential literature, like Camus' Stranger, Dostoevsky, Chenet, Burroughs, Bukowski. So
the Beat Generation.
Yeah, so I basically was approaching the world in my photography kind of one way without any prejudice or accepted expectation, and otherwise I was full of kind of that gloomy, heavy existential feeling I grew up with, and I discovered, which fascinated me in literature. So my focus on what was out there, I think, was very much a result of those my experience and, of course, my literature upbringing, and which. But since I was an autodidact, I approached it intuitive, and I focused on topic, on people, but on atmospheres. It was a matter of perspective. It was a matter of contrast. It was a matter of light and the environment. And I think my photography just developed very much out of without any academical background.
But you had your own academy in a way that was these teachers from literature also.
My own vision and my own experience and my own expectation.
You remember which was the first photo you took with this gaze, with these eyes, let's say?
No, because I wasn't aware of my eyes or my viewpoint, and I didn't have any recognition, and I didn't look even for anything. It was just an experience. Actually, when I was starting out in Berlin, I was starting out with a very professional camera, Nikon, and black and white and analog. But let's say I experienced maybe years before with the camera Agfa color camera of my parents, but this was just playing around with it. So when I started really going out onto the streets, the fascination and the recognition of photography as a very expressive and very important, for me personally, important media to express myself or show aspects of the world others maybe didn't want to see, was becoming very clear. And I would say after the first start in Berlin in the 70s, in 78 I moved to London, and then I really knew I was, this is the expressive art form I could work with, because I didn't depend on anyone's budget. I didn't depend on anything, just myself.
Yeah, and when you want to capture something that is there, let's say photography can have this particularity and this power to let you do exactly that, if you know how to look and where to look, let's say, to show something that's there, but maybe it's not shown so much, you know?
Yeah, well, photography is the strongest media in the world to catch one moment in time. There is no other media which has this potential. Whatever you see in the picture depends. I mean, people can see different things, and it depends how you can manipulate any photo, any viewpoint, you can make anyone beautiful ugly, and anyone ugly you can give him a kind of, you still can put him from his most positive angle and whatever. And you can also be very discreet and leave open spaces for interpretation. It always depends how you approach anything. It depends on the contrast, on the light, on the focus. If there's something on where several people are involved, you have to, and if there's an interaction between people, you have to react very, very fast. Yes. And you cannot think, you just have to be, go intuitively, and I'm a very intuitive person. I can make a fast, I had always a fast mind, and trusted trusted myself, and I didn't have to discuss with myself or ask other people or hesitate, or because if you are too slow as a photographer, especially as a street photographer, forget it. You gotta be
exactly, because you work with real life
This
models, let's say. People that are on the street and
absolutely.
You confront this reality yourself, let's say.
Right, yeah, you are confronted with reality. You cannot construct the reality. It's not like film or literature. It's you react to what's there, but not everybody sees the same thing, and then it depends where you are going to, and even there it's a matter of how much are you in tune, how fast do you see things, in which areas you enter, if you hang out at the wrong spot for 24 hours, you might shoot 200 fucking boring photos which don't give you anything. But if you are at the right spot at the right time, and then if you are brave enough and fast enough to make it happen. So photography is a very unpredictable media. It's absolutely unpredictable because you never know what's up. You never know how someone is reacting, if he's attacking you, if he's running away, if he's pulling his pants down, or if he's or whatever. So it's you gotta be kind of you gotta be pretty brave, and you gotta have some kind of a self-confidence, and you gotta be able, if it comes down to it, to communicate, to de-escalate. There are so many psychological things which, because photography is not always to make a photo and you go somewhere else and nobody was aware of it. It sometimes really has the whole story behind it, which you have to be able to relate to it and to get in and out unheard.
Yeah, there's a lot of dexterity that one has to have, and also kind of ideological construct in a way, or at least some kind of, because it's really a political situation.
Of course, yeah. You confront someone with, if someone comes to me and makes a photo, I don't know if I would like it if I'm in the wrong mood, if I was just blowing my nose or spitting on the spitting on the floor and someone makes a photo, I would say, hey, fuck you, come on. But so it's a kind of a contradiction too, because you do things, but at the other time, it's a very, very important media, and nobody should externally control it. They should always leave it up to the photographer and the person who is photographed. But you cannot make laws, because if you censor what someone is able to catch with a camera, it's the same as if you start censoring someone's words.
Have you ever been censored?
Yeah, of course. Censorship starts when someone excludes you.
Sure.
For example, but also in
literally, let's say.
Literally. That was one of my first catalogs. Viele Grüße aus New York, which was published by Photography magazine. Wolfgang Schulz, very, very important, the most important photo journalist, publicist, and curator. He had a photo magazine called Photography, and I was the first and the only one who he did an exclusive issue of my New York photos. And after it came out, there were 52 official complaints, and they put it out of the circulation. So this,
really?
Yeah.
Your first publication, in a way.
I think it was my first, my first catalog. Yeah.
The first catalog.
The first catalog. Yeah. I didn't have a book yet. I didn't have I was in other catalogs, but not. Yeah, but so it started, and there are other situations where they had to hang up some of my photography. For example, as another example, I had an exhibition in Berlin. It was, I think it was called Stark. It was in some factory, building in Berlin, and it was I knew the curator, so I accepted it. But when I came there and I saw all those fashion layout, I thought, well, this is a strange environment. But what was even stranger, I had a whole exhibition room which was bigger than your room, with big photos and everything. And the most surprising thing about me was that people from Armani and some other big really brands were very excited about my photography. They said, oh, well, it's strange. I mean, even the fashion world is... and everybody was talking, well, you got to come to Milano, you got to come to Rome, you come there. I said, okay, yeah, why not? Let's talk about it the next time. The next day I went to my exhibition and all the photos were hung up. I looked at empty walls and I said, what the fuck is going on? Yesterday there was a big shot. Everybody thought my photos are great, and now my photos are not hanging. So I went to the curator. I said, what the fuck is going on? I saw these photos are supposed to hang for 2 weeks. Well, the guy from Mercedes, they have our shuttle. They organize our shuttles with all the special VIP guests. And the head of Mercedes saw your photos, and he saw this photo of this one woman who has a swastika on her head. And he said, if you don't hang up those photos, we cancel your shuttle. So I said to him, look, do you know how many shuttles Mercedes organized to Auschwitz? Do you know how many fucking Mercedes Hitler and his whole fucking thing? And this woman was an anti-Nazi because her father was a Nazi, so she cut her thigh with a razor blade and put the blood and draw a swastika. But this fucking asshole, this complete... was blowing up something, which is very typical for our time. You see something, you don't really question it, you don't know what it is, you just fucking...
Censor it in a way. Well, this is very interesting because in a way it means that something in your photos is working. I mean, it's working in the sense of exposing something.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it makes some people very uncomfortable, because it shows a world which is not only negative. I mean, I don't show just fucking misery and pain and isolation, but I show things, and I always showed things. And I was ahead of my time, because many of my photos were published years and years, sometimes even decades later. And all of a sudden, I mean, the whole world was talking about it, but they missed the chance to publish it earlier.
Of course, but as you say with the fashion people, there's a cyclic, I think, appropriation from the center of culture industry and the margins of the culture, you know what I mean? And this cycle repeats in a way, and then you see fashion brands now that have this trashy aesthetics that at the time would have been censored,
Of course, That's always so many. Every decade somehow has its different idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, and this was your exhibition in New York already, no? In the 80s. Your exhibition you were talking about?
No, Berlin.
Okay.
So the guy from Mercedes.
Right. No, that was in Berlin. But this was in the 70s or when you came back?
No, this was later. This was even maybe early 2000.
Because after London, you went to Berlin in the 80s.
Well,
you went to New York.
I went from Berlin to London, back to Berlin, and 80 to New York.
And what's the New York of the 80s that you found, that you experienced? Because your work, in a way, is also some kind of city portraiting or social city, something to do with the space of the streets of the city, and of course, human lives living there, no? But I'm interested about your impression on this, because this you release a catalog also with photos from New York, right?
Yeah. Well, I definitely documented the Zeitgeist. This was a very, even pre-AIDS, there was a liberation and of many discriminated people on the edge. I mean, for example, transgenders and the homosexuals definitely started to dominate the nightlife. I mean, so where the music, it was a very and people in the beginning, in the early 80s, there was still a strong outcoming, a strong rebellious mood. It was a very anti-establishment, which basically came from the streets, people, but it also infiltrated the establishment itself, and all those heroes of the establishment, like the rock stars and the actors. So it was it was still kind of this feeling. It's an AIDS definitely shocked.
You
New
know,
York first.
Yeah, you knew the nightlife because you worked there in a club, right? That it was also a gallery or something like that. I read it was called La Danceteria.
Yeah, Danceteria was at the time after the Studio 54 was closed. Was maybe the club next to the Mud Club and maybe Peppermint Lounge. It was of the most interesting places. There were 4 floors. The last floor there was a gallery space, and the other there was always some live or some other kind of music. I mean, there came all the rock. The rock stars at the time, from the 80s, from London, Germany. I mean, Einstürzende Neubauten played there, Billy Idol.
Yeah. I read also Madonna played there, Run DMC, Malaria, Gudrun Gutz's band.
Madonna, I knew at least 1 or 2 years before she even did her. Well, let's say 1 year before she did recorded her first.
Nice.
Record, and I also knew the guy who produced her. I knew her very well. She was a regular in the club.
Because she was a regular at Club 54 before that.
I have never been at the 54.
Okay.
No. But and Madonna was too young for 54. She was.
No, I saw in a documentary when she was flirting with Basquiat, supposedly.
At 54?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, in
Maybe
early 80s.
Yeah.
Must be.
Must be.
I was working, I think, 81 at Danceset. I met her at 81, and I think 2 or 3 she did her first record. And I met a lot of people. Klaus Nomi, who died later was one of the first celebrities who died of AIDS. As I said, the AIDS really changed the mood in New York City. And in the gay communities. They got more aggressive, they got very much away from the disco funk, and everything is sexy and beautiful, and they got they got more political.
And this time in New York was also very interesting because in a way I think it was like a comeback of what happened in the 60s with the factory and there was a lot of happenings going on and a lot of art going on in the streets, or?
60s were more positive. The music was more casual, more friendly, sometimes a little silly. People were open for experiments, for new. Everybody was running into the newest films. If some media was covering it, or people. Pink Flamingo, for example.
Yeah.
A film which maybe you would see now on the internet. Yeah, John Waters' internet or something. And it would be one of, I don't know how many exposers. Really, I mean, you had you could fill your cinemas with people watching all those films which might have been censored at some other time.
For sure.
The same with Morrissey, Warhol's Flash, and etc. But it was still up. The economies were still up. The black liberation movement was strong, but of course in the 60s, fucking Kennedy got shot. Malcolm X got shot. Luther King got shot. It was this. But it was still, there was confrontation also between the young new spirit and the old spirit, and you had a sense that new ideas could overcome stagnation or prejudice. In the 80s, after AIDS, there was a more pessimistic outlook. Also the punks from the 70s. Which made it to the 80s, were pretty destructive. And it was still, I mean, if you compare the 80s with now, I mean, now the future looks much, much, much more bleak. I mean, you just have no sense who is your enemy anymore because you're surrounded by fucking enemies, or you're getting so fucking paranoid. I don't know, but everybody knows what's wrong, but everybody has his own fucking viewpoint, which he shares with a million others or 100,000 others which read the same bullshit at the internet. We are lost and we are so fragmented. It says nothing. People seem to share with each other anymore, especially in communication. It's like a mosaic of so many movements, and you can't agree with anyone. At least this is my problem.
I agree. I think digitalization of all human exchanges is definitely has definitely had very dire consequences for our well-being, like our organic well-being. You know, like mentally, like the care of the self.
Also the quality of communication.
Yes.
In any way, visually and literally, it's really a decline of even style. It's a decline of respect. It's a decline of any future ideas. It's very polarized.
But in the 80s, this was seen differently. You say that there was still this hope of a future that was going to be bright.
But.
It depends who you ask, maybe.
As I said again, with AIDS and also with the gentrification, which started in the 70s, the Thatcher, and then in New York, and you felt, okay, the establishment is taking over again.
It's sad when you see these cycles, you know, repeat.
Of course. I mean, you just So I moved 89 to Los Angeles.
Ah, okay. I didn't read that. Okay. And how long were you living in Los Angeles?
1 year.
Okay.
I was this was my craziest time. I was riding in Dodge Daytona with my ex-wife, a bottle of whiskey between us, a 25 Beretta gun. William
Burroughs' books.
Actually, when you read Burroughs, it could or Kerouac, it was, but I wasn't inspired by them. It was inspired by me and my fucking ex-wife, which we were at this time. We were a little bit this an understatement. We're over the edge, and arriving in Los Angeles, and we arrived in Los Angeles one day before my birthday. But 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, which actually was my birthday, I found my ex-wife and me standing in a room. It was a big factory place, a really big room, shaking from an earthquake.
No.
I don't know how I got up, and I don't know how I got back to bed again. But this was our welcome to Los Angeles,
Wow.
and it was a rough welcome, and it got even rougher.
Is it common earthquakes in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay.
Oh yeah, but they are very well prepared. The architectural structure is world class.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Many regions, I mean, the structures are not really earthquake.
Sure. In Latin America, for example, they don't
yeah.
build this world-class structure.
Not
see
even,
Haiti
not
right
even,
now.
not even in Turkey or in Greece or in Italy either.
Exactly. Like what's happening in Haiti right now, what happened before, you know. Even being part,
Haiti
you can say it's part
always
of the United States even, you know. And even so, it stays a third world, let's say, with these basic things that has to do with urbanism or public spaces.
Of course, but Haiti always gets fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, they never had a ruler who was anything other than fucking corrupt.
Yeah, and put by the United States also, which is a formula for never
Well, look,
getting better.
What's happening right now in Afghanistan, it is unbelievable. It is so unbelievable. 20 years, the Americans and the Europeans tried to fucking control it, put money in, tried to train, but put some puppet at the at the government without any inside view, with any sensitivity, with anything. The Russians already in the 80s, I mean, have been in Afghanistan, and then the Americans, and then it is such.
Yeah, but like in Libya, for example, they destroy all social tissue, all institutional tissue that was ever left to these countries. So objectively, they made them worse, you know. And this story they make of bringing freedom to these places, at some point it stops functioning, you know. How can you justify that they were bringing freedom to Afghanistan, you know, if they are running out?
Okay, look, one thing is for clear. The Americans were bringing freedom to Germany and to Europe after the Second World War. We don't have to say any other bullshit. But those countries were building up in a much fucking slower pace, with much more outlook to the future and much more interactive perspectives. When the Americans intervene in in America, in Haiti, in all those poor countries, they're patronizing it.
Yeah.
They don't have that future outlook, so they like to keep them in a dependent position.
Yeah, the backyard, they consider
this is the backyard.
Yeah.
So they couldn't do this really with Europe, but they can do this with poor countries. So, of course, I always believe, I mean, international interference, I mean, it's fucked anyway, it's imperialism, but still, there is something I believe in Eigenverantwortung. Eigenverantwortung means no matter what, you cannot always blame the fucking Americans. You cannot always blame someone else. You got to look inside yourself. So if you have for 50, 60 years corruption in your governments, I mean, sorry. Clean your own fucking backyard. And if you don't clean your own fucking backyard, if you don't have any common vision about your country, I mean, of course, and you get fucked, and don't always just blame the Americans. They have their fucking fault. I know this, and you know this, but they're not the only ones.
No, of course. But it's true that these countries are the periphery of the world society, let's say, economically, culturally, you know. But in the way you find you found this periphery inside the first world, as we say, countries, you know,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
of
main
course.
cities of these countries.
Of course, yeah.
And this is very interesting because you're showing something from the center, you know, that is already not working properly.
Absolutely. I mean, because there is nothing. Okay, if I would go to North Korea and they would let me make photos, I don't know if I could get anything, any photo which would show anything out of the order.
Wow.
But this doesn't make this fucking country good either.
Of course not.
This doesn't mean if you don't show anything on the surface what's wrong. I mean, you know how fucking wrong it really must be inside because everything is so restricted, like in a fucking prison. You know?
Yeah, I understand.
So it's healthy if countries don't just, but of course, what we misery and pain and poverty is never fucking healthy. You know what I mean? This is a disease. But who has the remedy for it? I mean, of course, there are some countries where you have less, and some countries you have more, and there are so many things which are responsible for it. You know, I mean, one thing is for sure, there are too many unbelievably rich fucking people not contributing anything. I mean, anything to other people's misery. This is one thing, but the other thing I'm absolutely, which is a taboo to talk about.
Yes.
Overpopulation. Fucking
It's a taboo,
overpopulation. I mean, any society or religion who doesn't believe in birth control, I absolutely reject. And I don't care what fucking religion that is.
Well, it's a responsibility of the church and the states that share still the power with the church.
Yes. And the people who are fucking, believing in their fucking messiahs.
Yeah. And do you think I think that you think so, that there's a relation of this inequality that too many fucking rich people of constructing this world, your object of study, what you see on the other end of the story, let's say?
Well, I wouldn't blame the fucking rich for overpopulation. This has nothing to do.
No, I mean your object of study, what you portrayed for several decades already. You think, did you see a change on this situation in the streets?
Well, in the street, yeah, of course. I mean, 40 years, I mean, change everything. I mean, change moods, outlook, fashion, attitudes. We're living in a much more restricted time frame area because everything you say is immediately put into a direction and disqualifies you because everybody expects you to believe in their own fucking
book or
book or Bible or whatever, and it's so fucking ridiculous because I think dialectic is the most important thing in the world. You gotta if everybody agrees, I mean, this is conformism, this is death. But the attitude on the streets, since, of course, internet, you know, when I was making a photo even 20 years ago, nobody expected that I could ever publish on internet, which I never did.
Yeah.
But the potential there are two attitudes. One is, some people treat you like your camera is a Kalashnikov. And others believe in that 10 seconds of fame by Warhol and are very obtrusive in their poses. And it was a more anonymous affair in the 70s and 80s since nobody expected to get exploited. in the internet or in the medias, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, they thought, well, I'm not important enough to appear in any fucking magazine
Yeah.
or in a newspaper. And if some, but now people feel very important if they get photographed and to come up with their rights of, and I say, look, if you don't see this photo anywhere published, anywhere, I mean, it doesn't exist. It does not exist in the world. I mean, so if I look at someone and speicher and
the drive.
Put it in my head, I mean, it could stay there too, you know, so it only exists for me. So how can you, or if I write or I make a portrait of someone, drawing or whatever, so there is no, it cannot be an official offense yet. Because, but at the moment you put it on, put it in a paper, magazine, or you publish it in any way, you would get now serious problems.
Yeah.
Since I never did this, I never was doing, I published my photo books sometimes 20 years later. But of course, I have some in Romania, which were 2 months later, but I don't know, but I mean, I never really, no matter how deep I'm digging into something, I never denounce anyone. I never have any prejudice, neither positive, negative. I just try to catch something very essential, the way I see it, and I'm not thinking about the future outcome. I'm just in there, and I think I'm authentic enough that I'm sometimes feel easier accepted than maybe some other people with a different approach, because the way you approach ghettos or anyway, you need a guide, someone who is local, someone who is involved and respected. And in Romania, I sometimes had it, sometimes I didn't have it, but I also in the Ukraine, I was went and
you were traveling through East Europe.
Yeah, but also Istanbul. My photo book is coming out in December. So
and in a way, what's funny is that your object of study, it's so concise from my view that it remains very similar to itself, even though in your photographs, I mean, even though the decades change, the cities change, and your immediate impression is not where they are or where they are, but it's something different. I couldn't explain, but it has to be with this, like your view in a way, you know.
I guess I don't think I can explain it either, but I think it's, of course, yes, I said before, it's a topic, it's a perspective, it's the light. It's the atmosphere, and it's also, my photos are never obtrusive, no matter how far the people go. You always focus on things around, and my photos also raise a lot of questions.
Yes.
They raise more questions than they give answers, and
is this intentional, something conscious for you?
And trigger your imagination. I mean, I'm aware of that, but when I make a photo, I don't think of that. That's ridiculous. I mean, but it, because if I would start thinking on these terms, I mean, it would be much too late. The party would be over when I would start.
That's the worst. No? The worst how possible is missing the party. And were there moments where you prefer to retain some image, not through the eye of the camera, but to watch it with your own eyes?
To retain what?
Like this kind of image you said, when you retain something, you can do it also looking at something. Were there times where you chose to look like this without the camera at a special moment or a special image?
this
It's too abstract, my question.
I don't quite. You coming from imagination in my head, or something I've seen, but which is not doesn't exist as a photo. And what should I supposed to do if I would like to see this? Well, if I understand you right, I mean that's something I could in a film. I could, for example, write this image down in a script or create it in a film. That's something different. I mean, that's
it's different languages.
Yeah, it's different language. I mean, that's and I prefer different languages because it was always for me also an escape. I never was clinging to my last creation. Something has to happen with it. I mean, fuck it, I did it and I went to the next thing. If someone would show it 5 years later or 5 days later, I mean, I was already preoccupied with my next project.
Yeah. And in which cases you decided to use film for this? You feel there's a particular...
Well, I mean, I wrote more scripts than I ever made films of. I mean, I wrote maybe 8 full feature scripts, and I did 2 full feature films. And I sold once a short story to Japan, and I think Murakami somehow exploited it and did kind of film with it. I also, do you know the film Tokyo Decadence?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty famous film by Murakami, and I did for Murakami one of his short stories. I did a film, and later he wanted me to direct Tokyo Decadence, but then he decided to do it himself. It was at a time where he was a crack addict and was very
unstable, let's say.
Unstable and irrational. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as I said, I wrote many scripts, and the 2 full feature films I did.
Yeah.
I never wrote a full feature script. It started out as a short film script because I didn't have the money. I didn't have the budget. I didn't know if I could even make the short film.
Yeah.
But I had after I did it, and some people asked me, well, what's the next step? And I said, well, if it raises that much curiosity, I'm looking into it. So I was writing my 2 major full feature films. It was like one short script after another until it had a symbiosis of a full feature film. But I never planned it from the beginning. So just from one scene, I created all that, I integrated it in something which followed up. And the visions and the ideas for my films are different. I mean, it's my past, it's my childhood, it's my life in Berlin, New York, LA, London, or it's experiencing for my photography, or my dreams, or it's some recollection from some literature. There's so many things which come into it, and I never have an outline. So I just have one scene, maybe 1 or 2 characters, and so then I'm playing around and I create something out of it, and I'm trying to let it develop from the inside of the characters I created.
Sounds very good if you are able to do this, you know.
Well, I'm only able to do it this way.
I can understand.
I cannot do anything structured and with. This is not.
I totally understand.
This is not me. I cannot work like that. I mean, I guess that's why I'm different too. And everything I'm doing is different, and nothing I'm doing ever aimed for a red carpet or success. I just had to do it. I just had to create it. My photos. I mean, if I was planning to become a fucking famous or rich photographer, I would have had to go into fashion. Or I never worked for any magazine, newspaper, or anyone else. So I always did something, and then I was thinking, well, and then what can I do with it? Or I went to the next step. But I was basically, in one way I was lucky. I went only the first time I ever went to a gallery in Berlin. It was I don't know if it was the only photo gallery, but it was the best. And it still has a good reputation, even if it doesn't exist anymore. And I showed them some prints, which my ex-girlfriend printed for me from of punks. And, well, they immediately accepted it and made an exhibition, but I wasn't even in Berlin when they did the exhibition. I was already in New York. So my ex-girlfriend, which even after I left,
hosting
was hosting the event. And this was my first exhibition, and from there on, I got always some publication immediately, and so over the last 40 years, I have hundreds of publications. But it was sometimes
from this moment on, from the punk photos, you feel that after that it was a continuity of your work as a photographer, or recognition.
It was always my style was always a continuity. The recognition, of course, in the subculture went pretty fast, but museums or big cultural institutions or big magazines or establishments really. I don't want to say censored me, but stayed away from me, and which is different now. I mean, of course, I'm still. I'm not presentable everywhere, and most I still think I'm too far. But I mean, I also have now some really big museums and establishments which
but I find
supported my work. And I always got enthusiastic reviews. I mean, I got some negative too, but the negative ones were always moralistic. It was always so predictable. It was ridiculous. But I was living somewhere else. I wasn't always reachable. I went through different phases. There was no really continuity of my presentation and which really, I mean, the only continuity is maybe the last 10 years. Where I have every
You are very active right now as a photographer.
Every year exhibitions, every year, even with my literature now, it starts getting, start getting ahead. So it really, for me, luckily I'm still fit and able to
be active.
Very able, I mean, still to be aware of it, to make the best out of it. I could be dead, I could be fucking a vegetable, I could be...
We all could be dead.
I could be in a wheelchair, I could have been stabbed or fucking clubbed to death. So I'm still around and I'm still busy and I'm still have a lot of imagination and projects, but now I have also support, good art, good gallery, really fucking good gallery, be in Taschen. Then, of course, journalists and different medias. And this is, recognition helps, but it doesn't change my work.
Doesn't help to be happier.
It doesn't corrupt me in any fucking way. It just the only difference is if I go now maybe to Brazil and make photos there for 2 months.
You can exhibit
I will
also.
get an exhibition immediately and probably a photo book.
That's very cool.
That's something I never
That's very
did.
cool.
Yeah, that's I never knew. And because nobody was sending me anywhere and saying, well, and waiting for me, you know. So this is good, but it doesn't change the subjects or anything. It makes it just...
And what do you... you say you don't like to plan and so, but since you are excited about your activities right now, also as a writer and a lot with your photo exhibitions, what would you wish to continue, or what do you want to take this, if you have an idea?
Well, I'm writing right now. I'm writing on short stories, which I'm getting a new noir novel called Sorry, Lana. Is going to be published in September. Golden Shop. I just overworked 4 or 5 unpublished novels nobody has ever seen. Nobody has ever fucking seen, except of maybe Nico, my girlfriend. And I'm planning another major photo trip. I'm still undecided, maybe Brazil.
A tour to shoot photos?
Yeah, a photo trip, maybe Brazil, I have to see. There are some, that's, I guess, enough for projects right now. I don't have another film project because I don't think I'm going to get a fucking budget, and I cannot, I don't think I can do another no budget film. I mean, it's too much for me, it's too much for my producer, Nico, it's too much for the crew, and it's too much for the actors, even if they probably would still do it. Because I was always lucky. I got a lot of really great actors. Sometimes I cast it from the street. Sometimes, of course, I had really some great actors. I could never pay anyone, but they believed in the project.
And of course, with these projects that in its origins or at the time are advanced, and therefore they portray some kind of reality that is not so common.
Right. Then even retrospective. I mean, if you see it, any of my films from the...
But this is the value they later on have, you know?
Well, definitely. They already had a value because they were really strong photos, but the value increases in photography and in film and in everything which is close to the time and authentic enough and shows something. I mean, as I said, there are many photographers who made photos in New York, and there are some really fucking great ones. There is no two questions about it. But the zeitgeist of the 80s in his sexual, not just homosexual, also heterosexual, and also the symbiosis of misery and excitement, I think I am probably the photographer of the 80s who showed that symbiosis. Others, of course, there are others who did other aspects, but this sexual outburst in all its variations, I mean, I think it's...
Right, because you portrayed like a world itself that is not only violence and confrontation, but it's also love, it's also happiness, it's also encounters.
Yeah, it's also death, it's also misery, and it's all excitement. I mean, this is most... If you concentrate on one subject, it's much easier for people to digest, because someone who is into sex is only looking at is buying this book, and someone who is more wants to see, what's really wrong in the world, or go deeper into someone's personal crisis, would focus on something else, and everybody has his focus. But if you put all this together, which is life, some people enjoy this photo and then they get miserable with the next one. They don't want to continue.
Because it doesn't continue the same story anyway. It's always confronting you with something new that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. This is uncomfortable for many people because they like to be in control.
Yeah, of course. It's true what you say about, let's say, consume society. We have this chip that we would like a targeted a product, you know, and with music it's the same. They want you to make this style and always the same and never change and never have a different influence.
Right, exactly. Otherwise, if you don't fit into it, you're gonna be at the fringe.
Yeah, but as an artist, or if you believe in certain creation process, then I think you know already that this is the death of. I think the death of content, because you start narrowing any input you would have that would enrich the work, you know.
The death of individualism. Without individualism, you cannot create shit. I mean, come on. I mean, you gotta be. Otherwise, everything gets so fucking similar. And I mean, of course, there is this incredible control of the industry, and. But of course, there is the availability of so many fucking people who are going for it. They don't. The mainstream fucking is really. I don't even know the fucking mainstream world. I mean, I try to fucking hide out, but I mean, in supermarkets and wherever. I mean, in the gym, you are confronted with all that shit.
Yeah. And what I found very paradoxical is, as you say, when really vanguardist movements or situations are happening in the streets, usually in the institution of art, in the big museums, you don't see this. Paradoxically, you start seeing this after this was appropriated by industry.
Of course.
With consume culture, and then just afterwards, the big institutions of art accept it, and I find this very paradoxical in a way.
This is, it maybe was always like that, but it's worse because endemic art doesn't exist anymore in the big cities, or it is really tough for people to independently create in this city freely. Find working space, find their an own apartment. They are driven out into the periphery of the cities.
Gentrification.
You cannot, in the 70s, you could hitchhike from, I did hitchhike from Berlin to London and got within a couple of days a flat. And I fucking got a job and everything. I mean, you cannot move from one place to another unless you have some friends who let you stay somewhere in the corner. It's much more problematic to create independently, and the if you try to make a living, you gotta adapt, or it's really tough to. Because also right now with this crisis, I mean, the music from the 50s and the 60s, maybe even the 70s, was presented on a stage first. There was this interaction, this analog interaction. I mean, the whole in Los Angeles. I mean, the Doors. I mean. London or Hamburg, the Beatles, and London Stones, and they started out really analog, and then the whole punk started out really, and even that is now so fucking restricted, and everything is through the internet. You cannot. It's much tougher to get really people who get excited about your music.
And you lose the being there, which has so much to do with the essence of photography. You know, like the being there.
Right. Yeah. Of course. And it's how do you wanna if you start out, I mean, there is no gallery left, which is, I mean, there used to be maybe 20 or 30 galleries in some fucking Friedrichshain, Kreuzberg. All of a sudden, there are maybe 5, and they have to adjust. And that's in the future, it might even get more problematic for people trying to get in.
You don't feel optimistic about how this will go?
Well, I mean, in art you always can slam break some
There's
wall.
still this possibility.
Yeah,
this
is always possible in some ways, but for the majority of people going through art schools or studying music or trying to somewhere produce something independently new, it's hard to reach an audience. I think so. I mean, I don't have this problem because I'm not starting out, but I think it's a sad possibility.
I will keep this a nice idea of the slam that you mentioned. I think this is a chance of hope that might still remain.
It always is there. I mean, you always can make an impact somehow. I mean, you know, there used to be a time when people were running around with Uzis or Kalashnikovs and shooting people on the street, you know, just to make to make aware of themselves, you know. True. But if your art is as strong as a sniper, then you really can reach.
Alfred Jarry, the inventor of pataphysics, they say he used to drive his racing bike at the end of the 19th century in Paris. And he would shoot in the alley to lighten up the way.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Miron, thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to know more about Miron's photographies, films, and books, we will leave some links in the description. Thank you very much for listening.